Hi everyone, this is Leonard Bartosek. This is the 7th episode of my reading project, Collective Utopia. If you're here for the first time, I suggest you going back to the very first episode where I explain in 15-20 minutes more in depth the entire project, what this is all about, the structure of it, the basic columns of the content, and how you can get involved. So for now, I jump right into the text that I'm reading. 8th of October 2021. Shining water vapor. Through the consistent rejection of any form of exploitation shimmers the utopia of a more beautiful world. Autumn shows itself in its changeable weather. The whole night it rained heavily again and again. In the morning, as I was preparing my breakfast, I took the first opportunity to scurry out again. Again and again, going outside, when this view slowly opens up between trees and bushes, is a breathtaking experience. The curtain rises, the sun breaks through the cloud cover towards the east, and the surface of the sea shows a particularly charming play of colors today. Again, this is a juxtaposition of different weather situations captivates me. Across the mountains and through the rugged valleys, the weather in the bay is split differently. Apparently the rain, the storm and the tempest have set the water masses in motion and partly recolored them by violent upheavals. Probably enriched by sand or other particles, a strip of bright turquoise water runs through the middle of the bay. Coupled with the various light conditions resulting from interactions with clouds, fog, and downpours, different color streaks are drawn through the sea almost like a giant rainbow. At the very back of the horizon, directly in front of the mountain ranges immersed in gray, a silvery white shines in the sea, glistening, and in the places there you can see water vapor rising. Directly in front of it, a dark blue clearly demarcates itself from it, flowing into an olive green, which in turn alternates with the luminous turquoise described. In front of it, a deep dark violet, which in turn precedes the dark blue that takes up the largest area of the sea. I sit again today at the little table built so close to the precipice and where a small olive tree offers shelter from the sun. The sun, as soon as it pushes itself through the clouds, still unfolds a strong intensity despite the autumn. My gaze turns towards the north and I discover a huge tower of clouds under which a tremendous downpour is opening up. A threatening sight. The huge cloud formation piles up, and under it this candle-degree cone of the flowing rain stands out, like a huge mushroom cloud, which seems to move slowly but surely towards me. I'm touched again and again by this rocky landscape and the majestic, seemingly endless sea because of its manifold beauty. At the same time, these forces of nature instill in me respect and at times unease and a queasy feeling. The mushroom cloud is turned off and is moving eastward. Exactly in the ale where the downpour is moving, I see a single sailing ship on the sea. This is still in the sunlight, but the cone rolls steadily closer. I imagine which view must open up for the sailors to see this black avalanche rolling towards them. In a sailboat, one is very directly exposed to the forces of nature. The contact with them is probably what makes this sport so appealing. I'm happy to watch sailboats from the secure land. The sight of them fires my imagination. When I lived in Buenos Aires, my Sunday ritual from the banks of the Rio de la Plata was to gaze at the sailboats. In my mind, I sat on them and imagined the feeling of freedom, being in touch with water, wind, spray, sun, and in motion. This always gave me joy and strong feelings of happiness. And this ability to imagine still represents for me an important key for my creative work. As a young musician at that time, working in a kind of tango punk collective, my financial scope was very limited. There would have been no possibility for me to put myself on such a sailboat. These people belonged to a different social class with which I had nothing to do at that time. But perhaps it was precisely this apparent lack that decisively fired my imagination at the time. Again, you see how relative wealth can be. Perhaps at that moment I was richer and more enriched than some of the people on one of those boats themselves, who provided me with the projection surface, the foil for my imagination. This is quite possible because decisive is not necessarily where I am, in which environment, but how I'm able to relate to it. Every space, every context in this imperfect world, which is only a shadow of the Platonic original idea of paradise or the biblical heaven, offers me the opportunity to connect with beauty, joy and gratitude, or not. I think of the Bible words, what good is it for a man if he gains the whole world but suffers damage to his soul? As someone damaged in soul, I may steer my own $1 million yacht across the water and still feel nothing but inadequacy. Poor person. Real wealth, inner wealth, comes from the ability to be in touch and in relationship with my surroundings, with creation, and with my fellow human beings. And this is one of the main problems of our way of living and doing business today, namely that our ability to be truly in relationship with each other is undermined, even made impossible by working relationships based on dependency. Because to be in a real and satisfying relationship, which is based on respect and love from person to person, is only possible at eye level, embedded in freedom. I think it is self-evident for us today that a love relationship is only possible between two equal partners. If one partner rules over the other and disposes of him, the mutual love will probably not be very great and can last. This awareness, which was not at all a matter, of course, in this country a few decades ago, and still is not in other parts of the world, has probably become accepted by the majority today. From my point of view, this is a great advance in civilization. However, what still seems to be very underdeveloped in our everyday world is the awareness that it could, indeed should be just as possible to experience, develop and nurture this quality of relationships in the workplace as well. If this is not the case, then something is missing. My largest request with this book project is it to help this consciousness, yes, this requirement to the breakthrough that we do not accept working relations any longer if these are given by dependence, exploitation and mutual overreaching. We spend the largest part of our life on the job. We may not accept the illegitimate hierarchical relations, these not equal relations, anymore shrugging as somehow normal and without alternative. Just as it is no more normal for you to be either a commanding officer or a mere recipient of orders in your marriage, we should no longer accept these kinds of dependency relationships and unequal power relations in the workplace. Indeed, we should discredit them by any means necessary. Just as a post-war generation, in a sometimes hard-fought generational conflict, knocked their fascist-influenced fathers off their pedestals as despotic autocrats and instead demanded family relationships at eye level on an equal footing and given mutual respect. In a similar way, the order of the day is to knock off our CEOs of their pedestals, reject hierarchical dependency relationships in the workplace, and instead demand genuine and democratic participation in economic profit and corporate decision-making. This must be the core demand today to truly transform the way we do business from the ground up, to move towards true sustainability that will be compatible with life on our planet. Any attempt at change, any reform, but at the same time leaving the top-to-down structure of a company untouched, is doomed to failure and to be exposed and rejected as greenwashing. This is the political core of the book, because without a profound structural change towards a real democracy, especially in the workplace, we will fail miserably with our climate goals and the attempts to counteract inequality in our society. At the same time, this means that we are striving for a fundamental cultural change that we can only succeed in if we are willing to do the hard work. Because trying to establish the workplace of tomorrow, where working relationships are based on real equality and fair participation, means a huge cultural upheaval and will not come easily to us on its own. No one claims that it would be easy to live in equal partnership and to integrate one's own children as full beings and their needs appropriately into a family structure supported by love. And nevertheless, although families today fail daily because of this claim, which leads to tensions and quarrels, this awareness has prevailed today. There is no turning back. Why? Because today we rightly perceive unequal family relationships based on dependency and dominated by a despot as violent and categorically reject them. Such an authoritarian family system inevitably leads to relationships that are devoid of any joy and love, and which curtail and severely limit the possibilities for development and the development of all within this structure. In such a hostile family atmosphere, sometimes severe developmental disorders on all levels are the result. If, on the other hand, we succeed in creating a family that is based on genuine love, affection and mutual respect, we can create a psychologically nourishing organism and a healthy protective space for the individual development and unfolding of each person. This love, and an unconditional one at that, is our claim today, and rightly so. And precisely because we are fallible human beings, and on top of that have to learn this cultural technique laboriously due to the lack of role models, we will probably never, at least fully, be able to live up to this claim. Nevertheless, an imperfect family which only partially lives up to this ideal, which fails daily, but which is at least given by a genuine effort, is 10 times better to us today than a seemingly functioning relationship of convenience. This hard-won self-evidence must be extended today in concentric circles to our familial relationships, first and foremost to those in our workplace. The first attempts in the late 60s to create a family with equal rights were smiled at by the majority of people as some kind of hippie fad. And it was very easy to point the finger at them, at their almost inevitable failure of their first experiments in anti-authoritarian education. Nevertheless, these people were to be proved right in their efforts and in their failures. Even there is still a long way to go, and the age-old patriarchal patterns continue to never berate in today's families. There's no turning back. No man today, without making a fool of himself, will stand up and propagate the benefits of a patriarchally, tightly run family. And that is exactly where we have to go to get it to. That a CEO who claims it is legitimate that he earns 300 times more than a worker and, on top of that, holds sole power of disposal over the worker's workplace, that such a CEO makes himself ridiculous and disgraces himself with such a statement. The power of the neo-feudal autocrats of the large corporations, which is still so strong at the moment, is worn out. And that is exactly what they feel. For no other reason, they are developing strategies today to save their dwindling legitimacy with the help of philanthropy and the now suddenly promised rescue of the world climate. But it won't help. Because especially a young generation, those who are really the ones suffering, will realize that these people are not the solution but the problem itself. We must not avoid this conflict. On the contrary, we should head straight for it. Just like the sailboat, which for a reason that is not clear to me, seems to be heading directly for this enormous rain cloud. I observe anxiously the happening. And just as it looks as if the sailboat would have to disappear any moment in the grey of the continuous rain, the cone slowly passed directly behind the boat. The cone drifts slowly past directly behind the boat. Was the crew deliberately trying to sail into this downpour and just missed it? Or was this a clever pinpoint maneuver? We need this courage today, this determination, in order to not to cowardly sail around the core social conflict today, but to head straight for it. We will work through this conflict and be rewarded with the fact that behind the fog cover, we will advance to a much more beautiful, joyful, and livable lighter future. We need to recognize the problem, confront it, work through it, and solve it. To do this, we must keep our goal in mind, give traction to a collective utopia with the help of a collective effort of imagining a more beautiful, radically different working world, one that, simply put, is based on love. Because love is the great equalizer. It treats all living beings equally. So no more lazy compromises, otherwise we will run out of time. Otherwise, at a certain point, a violent storm will overwhelm us and we will then drift, mast-broken, directionless on the sea. An image that Dante Alighieri already used 700 years ago to describe the experience and suffering of hell. However, the grip of the ideology of the status quo still proves to be very persistent and tenacious today. The illusion of the lack of alternatives still persists, with the help of which a very few become extremely rich at the expense of the vast majority in nature on our planet. However, the belief in this, which is becoming increasingly cracked, can only be maintained with an enormous amount of propaganda. It is only natural that, in principle, all organs and media that shape public discourse inevitably collaborate in stabilizing the status quo. If you look back in history, this has never been different, and it is no different today. Any real change that has actually shaken existing power relations has always come from below, from the people, from the many, or even from individuals on the fringes of power, but never from within the circle of the powerful themselves. Why this is so, I will describe elsewhere when it comes to the mechanics of power. However, for us today, as individuals embedded in our existing system, as someone who wants to break free from the system, who wants to participate in the future, who wants to build a collective utopia of a just world that is in harmony with all life, the following is to be advised. Firstly, try as much as possible to avoid the permanent indoctrination. That is, I advise as much as possible not to consume mass media, not to read daily newspapers, not to watch news programs, to avoid the so-called social media, and also to refuse the Hollywood machinery. Now you're probably saying, okay, what's left then? Yes, that's right, almost nothing. But we need this nothing for a real new beginning. Only in this nothingness, in this silence, when we strip off the daily noise that is supposed to keep us in line, can something new emerge and announce itself. And this brings me to second. Try as best you can to expose yourself, first of all, to this nothingness. Can you stand to sit on the couch in the evening and do nothing? Instead, listen to yourself, feel inside yourself, observe the coming and going of your thoughts and feelings, maybe meditate. This awareness work is not easy, especially if this is new territory for you. Distractions are at our fingertips all around us. Turn off your internet-enabled devices and embark on a spiritual quest, your spiritual quest. No one can take this search, this work from you. You have to find your own access, your own way. However, the departure, the beginning of a long journey to the hidden, beautiful and infinite landscapes inside your own soul can be very exciting, satisfying, and healing. Seek and you shall find. You will discover and uncover your own creative abilities. You will ask yourself the existential questions of life, the whence and whither, the meaning of life, the existence of God, all these ancient archaic spiritual questions. And you will be able to find your answers, your path, your faith. Because we need to recover our souls today. Building on this recovery process, we must uncover and solidify a strong spiritual core if we are to muster the strength, imagination, faith, and willpower necessary to truly overcome and transcend the status quo in favor of a better future in the world, in this world. In my opinion, the main problem of the left and Marxism already in the 19th century is that in their justified rejection of feudalism, capitalism, and the secular power of the churches, the baby was thrown out with the bathwater, and everything religious and spiritual was equally rejected and cut off. As a result, the spiritual core of a sustainable and resilient utopia that unites people, and on top of that enables a relationship with creation given by respect for life, is missing. We must not forget that state communism has at all times exploited the resources of nature just as ruthlessly as capitalism or fascism. If we want to establish a holistic way of life, we must not, in my opinion, disregard the archaic and archetypal sense of the spiritual of man, but on the contrary, actively integrate it. However, it is necessary to overcome everything totalitarian, and therefore it is not possible to dictate any particular form of spirituality. Every person must be guaranteed complete freedom in thinking, feeling, and believing. This does not mean, however, that one cannot simultaneously integrate all the different ideas and beliefs into one great collective utopia. On the contrary, for all the diversity of the world's religions and innumerable forms of other spiritual ideas, it's very easy, if one takes off the ideological blinkers, to find a lowest common denominator as far as the unifying moral imperatives are concerned. An important link in this could be the universal human rights. However, making a collective utopia effective is also a race against time. Otherwise, the alternative, what comes after the collapse of the status quo, will inevitably be some form of totalitarianism again. So thank you for watching. This was today's chapter. I'm going to look if somebody's asking a question, because you can ask a question, write something into the comments. But you, of course, you can also later write something into the comments, and I will read it and write an answer. Anyways, so from this week onwards, the live stream is going to be always on Wednesdays afternoon, Middle European time. Normally something like 5:30 more or less. And well, I think nobody's writing, so that's it for now. I'm going to publish all the chapters in a written blog as well. It might be easier for you to read and to think. That some of the issues are quite complex, and write a comment and participate in this project. So I wish you a very good week and see you next time. Thank you.